Peggy Scott Laborde. In New Orleans at Carnival, it seems the parades never end. And fortunately, neither do our memories of some of them from years gone by. We are back now with a sequel to our Emmy-nominated 2021 WYES special, New Orleans Parades from the Past. And over the next hour, we will look at even more rare home movies and film footage of 24 parades from the past.
WYES presents more New Orleans parades from the past.
With me to provide expert commentary are Errol Laborde, Carnival historian, columnist, and author of the books Mardi Gras, Chronicles of the New Orleans Carnival, and When Rex Met Zulu, Chronicles of the New Orleans Experience, and of course, Arthur Hardy, Carnival historian, author, and founder of Arthur Hardy's Mardi Gras Guide. Hello, sir.
Happy to be with you, Peg.
Great to see you, and once again, congratulations on the guide.
Thank you. This will be fun again.
Absolutely. And once again, we are here in the Charlie and Jeanette Corman Performance Studios of WYES, and let's kick it off with some very rare footage, 1937, Rex on St. Charles Avenue. All right, so here we are, and Rex was Albert Patterson. He was the president of NOMTOC, and then the queen of Carnival that year was Jessie Janvier, daughter of Judge George Janvier. And Judge George Janvier had lots of connections to Carnival.
He was a very important person in Carnival. He was a captain of one of the O-line crews, but was very active in that whole scene, and a long-lasting captain. So he was very important.
Yeah, and look at the music pulling the floats, the men are wearing hats, and some of the floats, the themed floats included the airplane, birds and flying fish, paper made by the wasp, the parachute, dandelion shoots, the lasso, the chameleon's tongue, and it was similar to a 1954 Rex theme, Nature Creates, Man Invents.
Yeah, what they're trying to do was to show things that were influenced by what nature did, like flowers influenced airplanes and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and Arthur, what are they throwing at that point?
I'm not sure really, but probably beads and trinkets and things. A couple of interesting things about this parade. I sense this film may have been colorized. I'm not sure. It's really neat to see the float titles being carried by people in the street. But traditionally, Rex has purple, gold, and green lieutenants outfitted in those colors in front of the parade. In this film, we see one lieutenant in front of each float, and it looks like he's in white. Now, I don't know if that was in a colorization process or if that was how it was done then, but I've never seen that before. This is early to see color for Rex.
And thanks to the Historic New Orleans Collection for that really rare gem. And we proceed with 1941 Rex Parade with the footage starting with Canal Street lampposts designed by city decorator Betty Finnan. Yes, there was an official city decorator from the 1930s through the 60s, and she was it. And this would be the last Rex Parade before Pearl Harbor, of course, the Pearl Harbor attack and World War II. And the theme was gems from the Arabian Nights, including bird damsels, kingdom and people of the sea, the wondrous gifts of Solomon. But Rex that year was Charles E. Fenner, prominent New Orleans broker and civic leader, there he is, who founded Fenner & Bean, a brokerage firm which later became part of Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith, and his son Darwin S. Fenner became Rex captain in the 1950s and 60s, and the queen of Carnival was Delphine Clark.
And talk about important people in Mardi Gras history is Darwin Fenner, who became captain of Rex, who was a major captain and who was a very transitional captain who did a lot of upgrading and changes in Carnival. And so between the two floats we've seen with Janvier in one and Finn, we have the other.
And let me emphasize the word transition because with him, the doubloon, of course, with Mr. H. Alvin Sharp, he said yes to the doubloon and a lot of innovations.
The doubloon, His Majesty's bandwagon. Some people say, and nobody can contradict this, that he really put February Cease to Love back in action too. Like they'd kind of forgotten about that.
And Blaine Curran, which we'll talk a little bit more about
that,
too.
yeah.
And the Boeuf Gras in 1959.
Oh, good point.
The return in paper mache. So we owe a lot to that Fenner family.
Absolutely.
I wanted to mention those decorations. Betty Finnan, yeah, the city had a decorator. Not only did she decorate for Mardi Gras, she decorated for Christmas because of like with the Sugar Bowl coming. And so that style of decoration, which went all the way down to lampposts, was seen like between Christmas and the Mardi Gras. It was really, a lot of effort was put in decorating downtown New Orleans.
Amazing. All right, and on to more Rex, 1948. And this footage begins with maskers on Canal Street. And oh my goodness, including, you'll see in just a moment, a carnival angel, but loving this homespun costumes. Lots of clowns and cowboys and some drag, some people in drag too. And look at this. And Rex 1948 would have been Dr. Alton Oxner, the founder of the Oxner Clinic and Hospital. And his son John would be Rex in 1990. But look at, there's the carnival angel. Loving that.
Alton Oxner, who was a major national figure at that time because he was getting a lot of prominence about the exploration he'd done on cancer and other things. But his son, John Oxner, who became Rex, told me that he was not at the time that became Rex a member of the Rex organization. It could have been an honorary thing, but he was playing, and the family didn't know that he was going to be Rex until Mardi Gras morning. And all of a sudden, all the dignitaries started to arrive, and so he was a total surprise to the family, and maybe to him also.
And you also saw the theme flow dances through the ages and all the different hoopla, including the maypole dance. But yeah, this is very pivotal. This is after the war. This is definitely a very important parade. Now we're moving on to 1948, the Krewe of Noor, a children's parade. The theme was Songs on Parade. And set this up for us a little bit, the importance of Noor.
Well, Noor stood for New Orleans Romance, and it was actually every public school in the city entered a float, and the floats until this year were pulled by children. This year they used Jeeps, and this is actually their second to last parade, and I did a little research and found out there was a king of each float, a king and queen from the elementary schools, but there was one overall king and queen of all of Noor. And the king that year was William Knowles and Queen Joan Flinder. And I'm sure it was a really big deal to them and to all the kids that participated.
And this was shortly after World War II, so there were lots of Jeeps and lots of soldiers around.
That's right.
To do that sort of thing.
They had as many as 100 floats some years.
Wow.
Yeah, really big deal.
That's a whole lot. And I love that it was sponsored by the Association of Commerce, which I guess was like the Chamber of Commerce.
Sure.
The Chamber of Commerce. Now, not shown in the footage, but in 1948, this parade was viewed by First Lady Bess Truman and her daughter Margaret. They reviewed the parade from Gallier Hall. They also attended the Hermes parade and the ball of the Mystic Club and the Krewe of Moslem, a fraternal organization that was part of the Shriners, at the auditorium. But very special, and of course, Carnival and children. We still have the Children's Carnival Ball,
Yes,
don't
we do.
You know, so
celebrating
we don't really
their
have a
100th anniversary.
Oh.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the Truman family was probably collecting its after the war glory because the war had ended. Now they can relax, have a little more time, and then go around and talk about what happened. So.
Absolutely. And for many years, the Little Rascals paraded too. So you had some sweet moments there.
A lot of kitty clues.
Lot of kitties. Okay. And now we move on to the 1948 Thoth parade. And this is footage, man, is this rare, of the first Thoth parade. Their theme was mythological divinities and demigods. And the king was Gilmore Dufresne, and the queen was Gertrude Hebert. And man, this is just really something. Of course, this is on Magazine Street initially.
Right at Napoleon Avenue, where the police station is, and they ended at Henry Clay. Now they start there. That started, years ago, with Children's Hospital.
And look at the mules.
Oh,
That's something
fabulous.
else, you know.
And the parade began by the building known as the Rink at Magazine.
Oh, yeah, Berman Gym. The
Berman Gym,
yeah.
Magazine and Britannia, and then went all the way down to, actually it began and ended there, but it did the loop of Henry Clay, as it did for decades later. So, and one really interesting thing about this, I've copied every other historian who wrote that first parade had 5 floats. Film showed us there are 10 floats, so we've been wrong all these years. 10 floats in the first Thoth
The
parade.
thing you always have to say about Thoth is that they pioneered the idea of passing by uptown institutions, health
Yes,
institutions.
some-
And so they're right, when you see they're right, it's always kind of serpentine going all around.
For homes for the
And they still
elderly,
do that. They still
shut-in.
try to have that type of
The
route.
term shut-in.
But
they used
that,
to
from
use.
day one, that was their mission, and they're to be commended for that.
Yeah, very sweet. The mules, very quickly. The mules, aren't those originally what the sanitation department
Yes,
had?
they were. But did garbage trucks during the day and floats at night, you know, wonderful. And that ended in 1951.
Wow, so we're seeing almost towards the end there. All right, moving on to 1954, the Venus Parade. And the theme that year was Magic Moments of Music. The Queen was Mrs. Belmont J. Sanchez. There she is. And footage, of course, this is rolling near Gallier Hall. You can see the Queen being toasted by then Mayor Chep Morrison. That's beautiful footage.
Really,
With
it's
the little
clean.
pages.
You can see
Look, there's Jeff
Morris
in
in
the
the middle,
center,
kind of like
yeah.
the baldish man right in the center.
And he loved Carnival. And so you see him in a lot of footage of that era. He was very definitely into the Mardi Gras scene. There were 16 floats, including Scheherazade, Madame Butterfly, Babes in Toyland, Carnival of Venice, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And Venus, we should point out, was founded in 1941 and paraded until 1992 on the Sunday afternoon before Mardi Gras.
And they
right?
used floats from Babylon. And you'll notice the Choctaw Club is prominently seen in these films, which was like catty corner with
Political
Gallier Hall.
organization, huh? Yeah. Wow, that's terrific. And that's Scheherazade. And, you know, all female. This is an early all-female crew.
And you can see some Czechoslovakian beads there they're throwing.
Oh, yes, look at that. Yeah, you can really tell.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Choctaw Club, because back then it was common in cities to have these political organizations. In New York, you had Tammany Hall, which was named
Yes.
after an Indian, the Choctaw Club. And so somebody like Morrison was looking across the street at the Choctaw Club, which sometimes was the opposition.
Hey, at Mardi Gras, everything goes away, right?
Exactly, exactly. Look at Venus. And once again, I love talking about throws. Primarily, today we're so used to so many different kinds of throws, but it was mainly beads, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
oh, mainly beads.
And
then
Venus was
just
really
little
the
trinkets.
pioneering women's parade. I mean, they may have been small before, I don't know, but this was like the first major women's parade. And then coming down a few years later would be Iris.
Right, they
And so
started
for
in
a long time,
59.
it was Venus and Iris who were who were the two top parades.
Who were both founded by Ament Nungesser.
Yeah. And of course, Annette Mason was also
Yes.
involved just a few years later.
She
was
certainly
very much a
was.
part of the history of that. And we're going to move on now, still with Venus, but many years later, 1968, the Venus Parade. And this is rarely rare, because this is when the parades went through the quarter.
Yes,
right
indeed.
there at the 500 block of Royal, the corner of Toulouse. The theme was the sounds of music. Floats such as the Arab spread culture, Greek mythology, its impact on music, opera, music of the American circus. The Queen's name was kept secret starting that year and continuing to the end of the crew, actually. The king was Harry Rosenthal, who was the king of many parades of the 1960s, including Endymion, right, Arthur?
Yep, 17 crews he was king of, either a ball crew and or a parading crew. And for several, he was their first king, as he was for Endymion. Quite a character.
He
It was
really
such a
was.
special experience to see a parade in the quarter. I mean, things were close together. The music really echoed easily.
Well, Arthur, and having been a band director for many years in a prior life, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you marched through that. What could the sound must have really reverberated?
It was
huh?
just wonderful. When you turn that corner off of Canal Street onto Royal, no matter how tired you were, everybody just pepped up. And again, the sound, the lights, if it was a night parade, the crowds, it was so intimate. It was just a special experience. And that ended in 1972 when the police department decided the size of the floats, the size of the crowds were just so huge that if they ever had a fire, the whole quarter would burn down. So they banned parades in the
Well,
first place.
also, didn't you also have the beginning of some of the super parades
Yeah.
like Bacchus,
Yeah.
which was a much larger scale?
Floats.
Yeah, I think
Too-
once
too
they saw
big.
Bacchus going through
Yeah,
the
too
quarter, they
big,
said,
huh?
we can't let this continue to happen.
Yeah. So moving on to 1956, the Carrollton Parade. The theme was the story, The Bluebird. There we go. Look at the property truck. Unfortunately, it looked like it was rainy that day. And the king was Frank Saporito. The queen was Barbara May Brough. Look at the use of convertibles.
Yep.
That was something really popular with a few parades, but especially the Carrollton. Sorry, it was so rainy, but and this is when Carrollton paraded on Carrollton,
Yes,
wasn't
it
it?
did.
In parts of Mid-City.
Well, Carrollton on the Canal Street, it turned on the Canal Street. That was the main part of
Yeah,
the crowd.
yeah.
But the to a lot of people, Mardi Gras began with the Carrollton parade.
Yes,
That
you're
first
right.
Sunday. There may have been a few miscellaneous parades, but that Carrollton Sunday was really the big thing. And it would always have huge crowds. And of course, it was the first thing in that part of town as opposed to the
Yeah,
uptown route.
they started on Oak Street where the den was, and they went down Carrollton to Tulane Avenue and would stop at Charity Hospital and had toys for the kids, which
Oh,
was
wow.
wonderful, wonderful tradition. And you would see those same floats that on what is now Endymion Saturday in the Adonis Parade.
Oh, all right. And wasn't Mr. Ackerman an early captain?
Mr. Ackerman was the first captain after the war that really revitalized the crew of Carrollton, and he was also king and just a model captain.
Yeah, as I recall, he had a refrigeration company in Carrollton.
Right
off
on Oak Street.
On Oak Street,
Yep,
right.
where the den still exists.
Okay, and moving on to 1956, the Hermes Parade. The theme was the Snow Queen. Look at the flambeaux here.
Yeah, actually,
the King's
flares.
a Secret.
They started their
Flares.
parade with
thank
hundreds
you.
of flares. Then they had flambeau, which I believe they got from the Knights of Momus.
Wow, and this is St. Charles, and you can see the Lafayette Hotel sign a little bit in the background. It's
Yep.
kind of dim, but you're near, obviously, Gallery Hall. Look at the neon. You just saw a
Yeah.
little bit of neon
Well, you
there,
know,
too.
Hermes invented that, brought that to parades with their first parade in 1937.
Yeah, I was going to say that this is an appropriate shot for Hermes because Hermes, when I think about it, the first thing is I think about lighting, all the work he did with lighting, and so you kind of get an idea of what existed at the time, and it still does good things with lighting, and it still is a really pretty parade.
All right, and moving on, and this is really something, the 1958 Rex Parade, passing by the then new City Hall right there at Duncan Plaza. I love those walking figures, and I'm so glad that Rex has brought back that tradition. Done by Mr. Berticelli these days.
Yep.
This is in front of City Hall. Today's City Hall, instead of Gallier Hall, they moved over, but just for a few years. And here's Rex, who was Joseph Merrick Jones, and the Queen was Augusta Dinwiddie. The theme was Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales. Look at those. And the parade route, yes, was altered, but that only lasted till what, 62?
Yeah, 4
huh?
years, I think, and people were tired of it.
Yes,
These are props
this.
that Blaine Kern imported from Via Reggio, and a lot of animation. But let me tell you something, these parades still passed Gallier Hall, even though there was no
They did?
toast there.
Oh, good to know.
So we can
Okay.
technically say from 1857 till forever, every major downtown, uptown parade passed Gallier Hall.
Yes, and I know you wanted to mention a little bit more about
Well, I was
Blaine
going to
Kern,
say,
too,
that
huh?
yeah, the official activity was shifted to City Hall. That's where all the favored guests were invited, where the mayor toasted. And so it was supposed to be a big deal to pass the new City Hall, but people didn't like it. It was
No.
too out the way. You didn't have that same neighborhood feeling that you had. People have never liked the new City Hall. Even today, people don't like that building.
Yes.
Okay, it's always been an unpopular building. And so after a few years, they moved it. And it also made the parade longer. It delayed it. And so everybody
Yep.
wanted it back on St. Charles where it belongs. And that made St. Charles once and for all the ceremonial capital of New Orleans. Before that, it was where the government was. Now this is where you have your ceremonies.
Exactly.
And at this point, as we said, the float from Via Reggio, that float was in so many parades. And this is the early days, of course, of Blaine Kern. You tell that story.
Well, the
how
story
Darwin
is that
Fenner-
when Darwin Fenner, who was the captain, when he hired Blaine Kern, he sent and supposedly paid himself, he sent Blaine Kern to Via Reggio, which had
In
a very
Italy?
active
In Italy,
carnival
of
scene.
course.
And he studied that float making. And so when you see those figures with the eyes blinking and the hands spread out, that's a Via Reggio figure. But anyway, he brought that technology back to New Orleans, and it was a big influence. The Via Reggio, there's still a big parade in Via Reggio today. It's a big thing, okay? And so there was a real Via Reggio influence on New Orleans. I kind of think ultimately there was a New Orleans influence on Via Reggio too, because I think that they saw the way we did it, and so I think they adopted some of our things as well. But they became good partners. But yeah, they was the influence. But you don't see the Via Reggio look anymore. in the
No, you
parades.
don't. You really don't. All right, moving on, though, to 1958, Zulu Parade. And the king that year was Alonzo Butler, and the queen was Wilhelmina Garrett. And this was, of course, a much smaller scale. I love some of the signs.
signs are great.
It's so much fun. I mean, they're obviously having fun. The part of their walking continues here. And yes, in 59, we have also 59. Look at this, Hail, Hail the King. And once again, those wonderful, wonderful signs. But some of their members are walking. These floats were fairly tiny. And look at this, the 40-foot reins, R-E-R-A-I-N-S.
Notice the tin foil on the floats too. And I think Zulu may have been the first male club to actually have the queen ride in the parade.
And you know, you never knew where Zulu was going to go. Oh, here we go. The King Crow entertains. Arthur, tell us about that float.
Well, a fellow named Nat King, who was king in 1954, was a pitchman, PR guy for the Old Crow Liquor, and I think that float had something to do with that. He also was a historian, had a publication called Tan Mardi Gras that covered African American Carnival. The first one in 1949, did this all the way up, off and on until 1973, and it's just a gold mine of a picture of businesses and crews in that era, which didn't get much publicity in the mainline press.
Right, and in 59, the royalty was, the King Zulu was Melvin Green, and the Queen was Doris Madison.
But with Zulu, there was also the funeral home, the Gertrude Geddes Wells Funeral Home, which was a real gathering point for the Zulu organization.
Absolutely, and I love seeing the Witch Doctor and the Big Shot, which continues today. That's really fun, some things continuing, and once again, at that point, you never knew about the route.
Fortunately, that changed.
That
So everyone now can
changed.
know where they're going to be.
Yes, now you know.
And once they wanted to be on the standardized route, I mean, the same St. Charles route, I mean, they couldn't be going, you know, from place to place. And so that changed it all.
Absolutely. Moving on to Momus, 1960. Oh my goodness. And the theme that year was birthstones, the pageant of birthstones. And you'll see Flambeau, here's the Momus captain, and Momus being one of the gods of mirth and revelry. And of course, Momus, the king, is never revealed. He's always masked. And
Now, Momus is
I love that he had to move his mask a little bit to toast, huh? What?
Momus is one of the old classic traditional parades. So if you want to see what early parades look like, you know, look at this Momus parade. Momus started in 1872, the same year that Rex did. The only difference is it started at the other end of 1872, around New Year's, but it lasted for a long time. And then it stopped parading for various reasons. It was sort of reincarnated with the Crew of Chaos, which does parades like Momus used to do and does satire like Momus used to do.
And you'll notice the flambeau, or the four flambeau variety, Comus used the two-torch variety, and Momus and Proteus had four.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great piece of carnival trivia. I love that.
Now you know.
Now I know. I didn't know about that. That's for sure. Look at that. Now, oh my goodness, we get to see an early Endymion parade, the 1968 Endymion parade. The theme was Highlights of the Silver Screen. It was the second year of Endymion, and the Queen and her court were at Gallier Hall. The Queen was, and here we go, we've got St. Aloysius band. Yes, St. Aloysius.
Now, what people need to know is that in the early years of Endymion, it wasn't the big Endymion that we would come to know.
And Koryezu here too, yes.
Yeah, it was basically a Gentili-based parade. As you see the Koryezu band, it was after a few years that once Bacchus got rolling, became sort of like the model for all this, and Endymion became like a Bacchus-type parade.
And we should point out that Koryezu and St. Aloysius, you know, eventually merged in 1969. And here is our captain seen in a chariot.
Yeah.
A chariot, not a float.
And you'll notice leading him were cheerleaders that spelled out Endymion. And for their 50th anniversary, as a surprise to Ed they did the same thing.
Oh, I love
a group
that.
of young women with the spelling out of Endymion.
And the king here is Henry Luss. And the great train robbery, these are highlights of the silver screen. It's a little hard to see, but the Bible, Irma la Douce, North to Alaska, Goldfinger, the Buccaneer, How the West Was Won. Yes, the floats were rented from the crew of Carrollton. Right. And the 1968 theme was the Saga of the Mississippi. So they really had to kind of modify, didn't they?
Their ball was at the Jung Hotel.
Oh, wow. And there was rain earlier in the week, which forced the cancellation of both Momus and Hermes parades. But so this is extra special that, you know, and people, in terms of Endymion, it's interesting because, E, as you can share with us, it wasn't named after Endymion, the Greek god, was it?
Suppose it was named after a racehorse.
Yep, a winning racehorse.
Yeah.
Because Muniz
Ed
lived-
Muniz, being
yeah.
a Gentili guy, I guess he was walking by the fairgrounds one day. He's heard about a horse named Endymion, kind of took a liking to the name, and that's what he called it. But it did also fit in with the whole Greek god sort of thing
Yeah,
too. Yeah.
but Arthur, membership was 225.
Yeah, they have more members on the crew Pontchartrain float, like 9 floats together, than they did that first second
How about
parade.
how many members these days,
It's-
approximately?
I think it's 3,300. Yeah.
Is it the biggest
No,
member parade?
Iris is the biggest. Yeah, the
And would be
women have
second?
taken over.
Biggest male parade?
Endymion is second.
The
Biggest
second.
male crew.
Wow, wow. All right, moving on. 1969 Proteus Parade. And of course, this is the Monday. This is Mardi Gras, Monday before Carnival, the world of Hans Christian Andersen. The queen was Marie Lejeune Baldwin. And Proteus's identity is, of course, secret. One of my favorite things, though, is the Proteus, the king's float, which we'll see.
Beautiful.
Which is, of course, Proteus being a god of the sea. That wonderful shell float, too.
And if you
Look at
try to
Thumbelina.
trace New Orleans society, somewhere along the line it all starts with a Baldwin. That the Baldwin
The
was
Baldwin
really
family,
like,
yes.
really prominent name. And so I'm sure there were Baldwins in a lot of these crews, the people who were related to them. Proteus has always been, I love this parade because it's a good old-fashioned parade. And so again, you can see, like looking at that Momus parade, you can see what it used to be like. You see those classic float riders' hats with the flat top to them.
In a lot of jazz bands, little walking jazz combos
Yeah.
usually in Proteus, and still such a beautiful parade. Okay, moving on to 1969. Also that year, Mokana, the Mokana Parade. The theme was Realm of Man in Power. The St. Aug Band, we'll see in just a moment. And this was initially formed in 1949 as a ball-only crew. The all-male crew began parading, as we said, in 69. Oh yeah, this is actually footage of the first parade, we should point
Yes.
out too. Rolling on the first Saturday afternoon of the parade season from 69 to 75. And first, though, they staged balls, didn't
Yes, it did, and it was very much connected with the Shriners. And there was another crew called the Crew of Moslem, and they actually, Moslem and Mokana did a couple of combined balls. I still have some programs from them. Really big deal. Nice parade, as you mentioned, St. Aug, and that was a big thing in 1969 for them to be in a major parade like this. And what a lovely parade. I'm not positive, but I think the Cantrell family did these floats, and they were prominent and still exist today doing parades. Just a really historic, I mean, to have the film of the first Mokana parade, who knew? I'm just so glad to see this.
And
I've been curious about the name Mokana. It sounds to me like some kind of a Choctaw name or something, but you look it up, and it's an indigenous tribe in Colombia. And so what attracted to that, I don't know. But
I
it's
didn't
something
know
I'm
that.
thinking of
It's
Mo,
different.
maybe Muslim, a combination
yeah,
name, and Kana. I'm not sure where the Kana. Maybe
Perhaps.
somebody will tell us.
We need to research that.
We'll have to.
Peggy mentioned that pattern of an organization starting with a ball first and then go to a parade. Others would do it. The most notable, though, would be 12th Night Revelers. Okay, they started and then they had a parade for a few years. And
That's
then,
a good
like
point.
Mokana, the parade went away also.
And earlier, Mokana had staged their balls at the Jerusalem Temple. Once
Yep,
again, the
of
connection
course.
with the Shriners, and then later, of course, Municipal Auditorium. And costumes were designed by
San Nicholas.
very famous costume designer for many, many years, and also designed what for Endymion and
Yes,
other
indeed.
crews too. He was
I
really
should
something.
mention the Booker T. Washington Band was also in that parade.
Oh, right. And just a personal note, in 1969, and one of the lady-in-waitings in the court was Joanne Deegan, a family member
How
of
about
ours.
that?
So there we go. And now it's time to go to the West Bank. In 1971, the NOMTOC Parade.
Their first.
The New Orleans' most talked of club, organized by the Judge Social Club, which was organized in 1951, primarily African American, has paraded in Algiers since 1970 on the Saturday before Mardi Gras. You can see the Blaine Kern artist sign building in the background, because there we go. Look at that. That's really something. And the theme that year was Cavalcade of Music. And there's the St. Aug Band right there.
They call themselves the pride of the West Bank. It's a New Orleans parade because they're in Algiers, which, as we all know, is part of New Orleans. But crowds are enormous for this parade, and they're on this. They parade at the same time as Tux, and Iris on the East Bank, then Endymion. So that's like the biggest day of parades in terms of sheer numbers in all of Carnival, the Saturday before Fat Tuesday.
And we should point out that the king that year was Edward P. Julian, and the queen, Jan Yolanda Connor, and yes, to see the St. Aug band. And then also we'll move on, we're still on the West Bank. In 1962, the Grela Parade, standing for Gretna.
Louisiana, yes.
1972, I should point out, and Grela Parade staged their first ever carnival parade in Jefferson Parish in 1948. 1972's theme celebrated the crew's 25th anniversary, and in '83 they switched from a Saturday parade to Mardi Gras. Then they disbanded in 2015.
Calling the parade Grela seemed to be like a West Bank thing, because you'd also see the crew of Allah.
Yep.
You know, it stood for Algiers, Louisiana.
And we also had in 1949 the crew of Jeffla, just for Jefferson, Louisiana. So something about initials on the West Bank. I want to point out Grela, and Errol, I think you've shared this story before. In 1998, actor Milton Berle was their guest celebrity, and somebody had told him he was going to be king of Mardi Gras. And when he wound up on UAP Long Avenue in Grela, he was mildly disappointed.
I know that all three of us certainly wax nostalgic for the parades that were in the middle of neighborhoods. And this is a great example, isn't it?
Yeah, isn't that classic to see the houses? Imagine people that live in a shotgun,
scale of
they
it.
pull a chair out on their porch and they do that. And so you see it on the West Bank, but you also saw it on the East Bank too, like Ferret. I mean, Ferret, and to a certain extent Carrollton, and some of those parades, that what they really tried to do. And that was the one good thing about the year of COVID, when people did the house decorating.
House floats.
And you can walk in neighborhoods and see something that looked like floats and parades. It really was a good feeling to have Carnival back in the neighborhoods.
Absolutely. And we're still in the 70s, 1973, Babylon. And the title float is Aida, of course, from the opera. And look at that, there's the Babylon logo, the jester, and the king is known of as King Sargon. LSUNO, Starlat's still LSUNO, and the next year became UNO, the Knights of Babylon. Here we are. And then Warren Easton is right behind us, and they have their own little streetcar float, loving that.
The tractors, the very unusual tractors, they were called river rats because they were used on the wharfs of the river. Here's my alma mater.
Is Warren Easton.
Arthur Knight was the band director then, the Warren Easton Eagles, and they started something in the early 50s of spelling out the name of the school with their cheerleaders, and that was a real popular addition to Carnival.
And this is, of course, the view from Gallier Hall, across from Gallier Hall, the Lafayette.
Aida has always struck the imagination of Carnival planners. I mean, here's this parade, and you know,
And here's
people
the
in Aida.
captain.
And then, of course, in the Carnival Ball, like even the Rex Ball, one of the great moments is the Grand March from Aida. It's a beautiful piece of music, and so it's a good story that kind of fits into the Mardi Gras legend.
Absolutely.
King Sargon.
King Sargon, loving that name. And of course, the Knights of Babylon continue to this day. Mm-hmm.
You know, we saw Hermes earlier. It's interesting. Hermes and Babylon. Babylon started as the Knights of Babylon and Hermes as the crew of Babylon. And after a year or two, they switched to the Knights of Babylon.
That's another great tidbit, Arthur.
And they both started around the same time. They both started like around the 1930s. Or
Yeah.
That was when you're kind of having this revival going on. They were calling the commercial crews. They weren't commercial in terms of ad, but they were like business-oriented crews.
Businessmen.
Wanting to get into the parade scene.
Look at that.
And they're done in the style of the old style Carnival too.
You know, it's so hard to film night parades. It really is. This is extraordinary quality for a night parade.
Sheesh, wonderful.
Decades ago.
Yes, absolutely. And moving back over to the Proteus Parade, 1974 this time, the theme was Living Jewels, and the queen was Catherine Black Raynauld, and a longtime captain here of the crew of Proteus.
We know who he is, but we can't tell.
On a white horse, white on white. And this is what I was talking about earlier.
Seashell.
That is, in all of Carnival, that is my favorite King's Float. I think it is a great King's Float. It's a beautiful one. And if you see it in the parade this year, where it's a little bit bigger float,
And the
a
longer
little bit more
beard
lighting.
is signature
Yeah, but
too.
it's really just a great float.
You're right, Errol.
Yes, and we said Living Jewels. Look at that float. Very, very traditional Mardi Gras, Monday night before Carnival. And looks like this is on Canal Street. This is a great vantage point. And you're right about the lighting. And look at the lower, how they have lighting from below.
Yeah,
That's very rare too. Not too many parades have that. And on all their glory, the flambeau, huh? Wow, wow, what a great moment there. Yeah, look at the lower lighting. You
It's
don't
just
see that.
beautiful.
You just don't see that. Love this, the snails, the snails. And now, though, very exciting, rare footage of 1975's Bacchus Parade. We will listen as early New Orleans TV commentator Mel Levitt narrates Bacchus 7 Jackie Gleason toasting Mayor Moon Landrieu at Gallier Hall.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, the moment that a lot of folks have been waiting for, and we must have 500,000 of them jammed into the Central Business District. Have the mayor at the microphone ready to greet him, yelling how sweet it is. The trademark of Bacchus 7. And here he is in all his rotund majesty. The man who calls himself quite simply the Great One. One of the imperial figures of show business, and we can't think of a better person to represent Bacchus. In fact, he might well be, if you believe in reincarnation, Bacchus reincarnated himself. Mr. Jackie Gleason.
Your Majesty.
Now a toast from the honor of the mayor, Moon Landrieu.
I'm sure you can see and sense the enormous enthusiasm with which your subjects meet you. And thousands of Orleans who have long hailed you as King of Comedy now raise their glasses and hail you as Bacchus 7. Hail Bacchus! Mr. Mayor, never before have I participated in anything as exciting and thrilling as this. And I'd just like to say how sweet it is.
Now, Errol and Arthur, we have heard stories about Mr. Gleason that night. Did you want to add
Well,
something?
a few things. First of all, the narrator was Mel Levitt, who was really Mr. Television in New Orleans. He was really the first local TV personality, back when there was one station, WSU, Channel 6, and so he's just well known for doing those kind of things and for doing the news and did Mardi Gras coverage. But the other thing about Jackie Gleason is that through the years, Bacchus people who were there that night said they had a really problem with Gleason, that he was very, very grumpy. You see him there, he's Jackie
fine.
Gleason, you know,
Yeah.
he's doing the shoulder shrugs and all that, and he was good before the crowd, but that he was grumpy that night. And some people say, well, he wasn't feeling well, that he was in smoking withdrawal, he was having domestic problems, but he was hard to deal with. But once he got on the float, once he was riding, I guess the old star quality kicked in.
Yes, and of course the history, the tradition of Bacchus having celebrities as their royalty.
They were the first to do it on a continual basis. Now, Zulu had Louis Armstrong in 1949, but that was a one-off. Bacchus invented the modern concept, starting with their first parade in '69, and Danny Kaye was the first king, and they had just A-lists, including Bob Hope, and till this day continue to have big-time celebrities lead the parade.
And that year's Bacchus theme was the circus parade, and we should also point out that that was the year, in 1975, that the Bacchusaurus made its debut during the parade. So lots of exciting things for Bacchus that particular year. And now, though, we move to the 1975 Argus Parade, of course, out in Metairie. And Argus's theme, and you'll see, look who's there. Barbara Eden. She was the Empress, and I'm sure we still have fans out there from I Dream of Jeannie and so many other things that she did, and How to Marry a Millionaire, I think, too. But Argus was the mythological giant with 100 eyes, and marched near Fat City, and is still out in Jefferson Parish. And other celebrity empresses over the years included Loretta Swit, who you'll see shortly, too. But there's Barbara Eden herself, and Phyllis Diller, Shirley Jones, Diane Ladd, Connie Stevens. The Rummel Raiders Band was featured. And I have to, once again, as in a personal aside, aiding Ms. Eden on the float as her page was my own nephew, Ward Scott. It was
How
a
about
page to
that?
the Queen. Here's Argus himself.
And they
And
had
they were saluting-
animation too, Peggy, which is
Oh, look
really
at this.
unusual for a Metairie parade at that time.
Sure, and absolutely. And Argus was saluting Jefferson Parish. There's Thomas Jefferson.
Yep.
Blaine Kern floats depicting Jefferson, Jean Lafitte, a Grand Isle, Bathing Beauty. First rolled in 1974. So we're actually seeing the second parade. And as we said, the parade continues to roll on Mardi Gras Day in Metairie.
Socio-politically, this was more than a parade, though, because a lot of people in New Orleans were kind of threatened by this, because this is the first time that Jefferson Parish had a big-time parade on Mardi Gras.
Right.
Okay. At the same time that Rex was marching, all of a sudden Jefferson Parish, this was at the same time that you see more and more people move to the suburbs. Morning Call had moved its stand to Fat City. Fat City was saying we're the new French Quarter, and that sort of thing. And so there's a little bit of competition between the city and the suburbs, and a lot of people were really just kind of felt a little threatened by what was going on in Jefferson Parish.
I'm told by an Argus official that Barbara Eden, was gorgeous on television, but figured when we see her in real life, she'll be okay. So she was stunning. She was better in real life and a wonderful personality. And what a great star. And she really got into it.
And I have to say that some of us do remember some other parades in Jefferson Parish, Heloise,
Yep.
and Zeus for many
Indeed,
years.
yep.
And I mean, the list is longer than that, but those are two. Now we're coming back to Orleans Parish in 1977, the Mid-City Parade, and lots to say about Mid-City. And the theme was fairy tales from around the world. It's always a husband and wife, king and queen, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond Willoft Jr., the foil-colored floats, the covered floats. And Arthur, the greatest bands in Dixie contest. Please set that up for us a little bit too.
It was a really, really big deal held at the corner of what was then Jeff Davis Parkway and Canal Street.
Now Norman C. Francis.
And the bands from all around the South, it's called the Greatest Bands in Dixie, would actually stop and do a 2-minute routine. And it was just one of the highlights of Carnival.
Did you participate in that?
Never did as a teacher or as a student, but friends of mine did. Holy Cross was in it many, many times. This particular year, they placed 4th, but they actually won the parade in 1979. I think maybe the only New Orleans band to ever win it. My good friends at Holy Cross, band director was Mike Orcus at that time, I believe.
Well, we get to listen to a performance of the Holy Cross Band, St. Louis Blues. All right, and now we move to the next year, 1978, the Zulu Parade. And this time you will see Zulu members and the Olympia Brass Band marching. Here we go, they're on the street. And we'll get to see with the Olympia Brass Band just a few seconds of Alan Jaffe, the beloved Alan Jaffe on tuba. There he is, look at that, wow. Who of course was one of the stalwarts and pioneers of what we now know of as Preservation Hall. And they're passing by Gertrude Geddes Willis Funeral Home on Jackson Avenue. And that has long, as we said, been a spot for toasting Zulu royalty, continuing to this day. The king was Willie Papin and Queen Lourdes Marie Russell. I bet maybe related to Mr. Jim Russell, who was very much a part of Zulu.
Indeed he was.
Thanks to the Historic New Orleans collection for that footage. Now, I keep saying we've got rare footage. This is really something too, okay? Because We're going into 1979, and during the police strike, of course, there was a police strike in New Orleans, which meant, what happened to the parades?
There were none in New Orleans, but there was still the Jefferson Parish Mardi Gras, which included some New Orleans krewes, which wouldn't parade in Jefferson Parish too.
And we're going to show you 1979, Pete Fountain, who was such a stalwart of, in the early morning, walking the St. Charles Avenue, into downtown parade route, his half-fast walking club. Actually, that year, walked in Argus, rolling out in Metairie on Mardi Gras Day. No parades in New Orleans, as we said, because of the strike. So let's listen to, though, Mel Levitt, once again, this time from a WGNO broadcast, followed by the 1979 Argus Parade, and his narration, including MASH actress Loretta Swit, Empress in 1979.
Jefferson Parish is trying as best it can to accommodate the overflow of Orleanians, visitors, and marching groups who otherwise might not be able to celebrate. And that, of course, includes Pete Fountain's half-fast marching club. And there's the maestro himself. Some people say it ought to be the half-smashed marching club, but who cares? It's Mardi Gras, marching under the banner of the Jack Daniels Country Club. And that's Pete's daddy, who's still marching, and I guess he's up around 80 years of age. Well, he's not marching tonight. They're giving him a little rest right now. Pierre Dewey LaFontaine, Sr. Long live Carnival! Here's the captain of Argus. Argus is named after the 100-eyed Greek guardian of Lo. And I guess that's appropriate since at least 1 million eyes will be focused on him today, bloodshot or otherwise. Ever since their beginning in 1973, Argus has crowned famous show business celebrities as Empress, Barbara Eden, K-Star, Phyllis Diller, Shirley Jones, and today Loretta Swit, the legendary Hot Lips Houlihan of MASH fame. Where's the crown? All hail Her Majesty, the Empress of Argus. All right, it's Argus's favorite movies, and first is Around the World in 80 Days, accentuated by a giant balloon up front. Hidden somewhere down there, I guess, is Passepartout. Hey, mister, throw me something. Throw me a Mardi Gras.
Errol and Arthur, when I hear Mel Levitt's voice,
Boy, it brings back memories. Huh?
Does it ever? Because we all look forward to that week leading up to Mardi Gras at 10:30, right after the 10 o'clock news. They, of course, had their broadcast from 520 Royal on the balcony as the parades went through the corner.
They were filmed, immediately developed, and shown in the news. Wonderful. A couple of things about that Argus parade.
Yes.
The captain was Bob DeVinny, the original Bob DeVinny, who was a councilman in Jefferson Parish. And I'm told by people who were there that Loretta Swit was petrified. When she got on the float, she said, "You're going to have to take me off. I can't do this. I'm afraid." And they said, "Just give it about 2 blocks." And she got into, oh, this is what Mardi Gras is all about. But it was a great experience for her and a wonderful parade. And, of course, Argus still is a main attraction on Fat Tuesday in, can we say Fat City? In Metairie.
Absolutely. Errol, some final thoughts?
Well, just to remind people what therapy Mardi Gras is, that there have been times in the city's history when something bad happened in the city. The Howard Johnson sniper incident, Katrina, the terrorist incident in New Orleans, and people were just doubted, how can we survive as a city? And New Orleans proved that we could. And Mardi Gras did, that it brought people out into the streets. And I think New Orleans, more than people realize, is a lot better city, not just because of parades, but just because of Carnival allowing the city to prove itself.
Yeah. Arthur?
Well, seeing these films just brings back so many memories, but, we still have most of that. We've lost some things. It breaks my heart to see parades at Gallia Hall and see city dignitaries and general public in blue jeans. When you look and you see they used to be in tuxedos, but that's okay, it evolves. But it's just still so special, and I think what makes living here just so remarkable is we do things differently. We're New Orleans, and we'll keep doing it forever, I hope.
We could be here forever talking about favorite moments of Carnival, but a really great example of past meeting present would be Monday, Mardi Gras, where you get to see Proteus.
Yep.
Okay, you know, from the 1800s, going back to the 1800s, and then Orpheus, very much inspired by, of course, the old line krewes and Proteus itself, but that past and present. But we're focusing on the past, and this has been a wonderful visit, looking
really
back,
has.
and oh my goodness, to see people's home movies, and many of the krewes, you know, did have the wherewithal to also document, but also seeing people on the streets in those homespun costumes. As we said, you know, lots of clowns and cowboys with the families on Canal Street. There used to even be competitions for costume competitions as well.
And we still have the Bourbon Street contest every
Oh,
year.
yes, we do. That's a competition of a different sort. But anyway, Errol and Arthur, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we've hoped that you've enjoyed this look back at more New Orleans parades from the past. Here is hoping that this carnival is just as memorable. Thank you for joining us, and happy Mardi Gras.